Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about the kind of story you think could never happen to you, until it does. I'm sitting here right now, staring out my kitchen window at the same old oak tree I've looked at for over 30 years. The morning light filters through its leaves, painting my table with soft golden patterns. Everything about this scene should feel peaceful, and yet my hands are trembling around my coffee cup. Because not long ago, this view, the same window, the same tree, was the last calm image I saw before my entire world began to unravel. It started with the smallest of cracks, a whisper of unease that you almost talk yourself out of believing. My daughter, Emily, had been visiting more often, too often, and always with a strange urgency in her voice. She'd ask me little questions about my health, about the bills, about my savings, in a way that felt rehearsed. At first, I told myself she was just concerned. That's what good children do, right? They check in on their parents. They care. But deep down, something else was stirring in me. A gut feeling I couldn't quite name yet. You know that quiet alarm in your chest, the one that hums before danger makes itself known? I felt it every time she lingered by my desk, where I keep my paperwork, or every time she insisted on helping me sort through my mail. The day it all began in earnest, the weather was deceptively beautiful. The kind of day you'd normally mark with a picnic or a walk in the park. I was in the middle of paying a few bills when Emily arrived, wearing that wide smile that had always been my weakness. She kissed my cheek, put on a pot of tea, and then, just casually, brought up something I wasn't ready for. "Mom," she said, "I was thinking, maybe it's time we talk about the future. You know, just in case anything happens." That phrase, "just in case anything happens," landed like a stone in my stomach. I'd heard it before, in other people's horror stories. Stories about families that tore themselves apart over money, property, and control. But those were other families. Surely mine was different. Surely Emily was just looking out for me. Still, the way she looked at me, head tilted, eyes scanning my face like she was searching for cracks, made me uneasy. She asked if I'd considered who might manage my affairs if I couldn't. She said it in such a kind, almost rehearsed tone, but her words felt like they carried something sharp hidden underneath. I brushed it off that day, changed the subject, offered her another cup of tea. But after she left, I sat there in the quiet, unable to shake the feeling that something had shifted. Looking back now, I realize that moment was the first shadow creeping over the sun. The first hint that my own child, the person I had carried, fed, protected, and loved without condition, was about to set in motion something I wouldn't have believed possible. And before we go any further, I want to say this. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Also, tell me in the comments where and when you're watching this, because I'd love to know who's out there hearing my story. You might think you know your family. You might think love is the unbreakable chain that holds you together. I thought that too, until the day I found out how easily that chain could be snapped, for the right amount of money. The days after that strange conversation with Emily were off. I can't find a better word for it. It was like the air in my house had shifted, heavier somehow. Every time the phone rang, I braced myself. Every time I heard footsteps on my porch, my chest tightened. And Emily's visits became clockwork, each one marked by that same concerned tone, the same questions about my health, my finances, my future. She'd linger in the kitchen after we ate, asking, "Do you ever get confused with your bills?" Or, "Have you noticed it's harder to remember where you put things lately?" Her voice was soft, almost sweet, but there was an undercurrent to it, like she was taking notes in her head. At first, I tried to rationalize it. She's my daughter. She loves me. Maybe she's just being thorough, just making sure I'm okay. But the questions got stranger. One day, she asked if I still had the same lawyer who drafted my will. When I told her yes, she smiled in this way that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Maybe we should update it. You know, just in case something happens." That phrase again, just in case something happens. It became a kind of refrain in our conversations, and each time she said it, I felt my skin prickle. I'd seen enough stories on the news to know that just in case was the phrase people used right before someone lost control of their own life. The real turning point came one Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garden trimming my roses when I noticed Emily's car parked down the street. Not in my driveway, not even in front of my house, just watching. She sat in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, pretending to be on her phone. I told myself I was imagining it. But later, when she came by with a batch of muffins, she casually mentioned things she couldn't possibly know unless she'd been there earlier, like how I'd spent the morning in the garden, like how the neighbor's dog had gotten loose again. She was watching me, I knew it then. Still, I didn't want to confront her, not yet. I needed to be sure, so I started paying closer attention. I noticed that my mail had been opened before I got to it. My checkbook had been moved from its usual place, and my health insurance paperwork, something I kept in a locked drawer, was suddenly sitting out on my desk. Then, one night, I overheard something that sent a chill through me. I was walking past my living room when I caught Emily's voice from the porch. She was on the phone with someone, her tone hushed but urgent. "She doesn't suspect anything yet," she said. "But if we get the paperwork ready, the court will see she can't take care of herself." Those words froze me in place. I knew exactly what she meant. She was preparing to have me declared incompetent. I stood there, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, listening as my own child, my flesh and blood, plotted to take away my independence. I didn't hear the rest of the call. I didn't need to. I backed away quietly, my mind spinning, my hands trembling. I felt like I just stepped into some cruel alternate reality where my daughter wasn't my daughter anymore, but a stranger wearing her face. That night, I barely slept. I kept going over every interaction we'd had in the last few weeks, replaying each question, each strange smile, each too-perfect visit. It all made sense now. She'd been laying the groundwork, building a case. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait for whatever she was planning to unfold. I needed to act. But first, I had to know exactly what she was after, and how far she was willing to go. What I didn't realize was that the answer to that question would turn my life upside down faster than I could prepare for. The next few days felt like I was living inside a silent countdown. Every moment carried the weight of something's coming, but I didn't know exactly when or how it would hit. Emily showed up again that Friday afternoon, her arms full of grocery bags. She'd never done that before, not without calling first, and the sight of her standing in my doorway, smiling like nothing was wrong, almost made me drop my guard. Almost. We unpacked the bags together in the kitchen, but it didn't take long before the conversation steered back to money. "Mom," she said casually, reaching for a glass. "I was talking to a friend who's a financial advisor, and she said a lot of older people end up, losing track of their accounts. Things get messy. I just want to help you avoid that." I kept my face neutral, stirring the pot of soup on the stove, but inside, my heart clenched. There it was again, this carefully crafted narrative that I was somehow slipping, that I couldn't handle my own life. "I'm fine, Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've been paying my own bills for decades. I don't need a babysitter." She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that felt like it wasn't meant to be funny. "It's not about babysitting. It's about being practical. You've got a house, investments, savings. You wouldn't want something to happen and not have a plan, right?" There it was. The hook. Every time she said something happens, I could almost hear the quiet scratch of a pen filling out court forms in the background. When she left that evening, I went straight to my filing cabinet. My hands shook as I pulled out bank statements, insurance papers, and the will I'd updated just a few years ago. Everything was in order, no missing pages, no unauthorized changes. But it didn't comfort me, because I now understood the truth. Emily didn't need to take anything from me in the shadows. She was planning to do it in broad daylight, backed by the law. That night, I called my old friend Peter. He'd been a lawyer before retiring, and though he didn't handle cases anymore, I trusted him. I told him everything, every strange visit, every loaded question, every shadow that had crept into my once peaceful home. His voice was grim. "It sounds like she's laying the groundwork for a guardianship petition. If she convinces a court you're not competent, she can take over your finances, your medical decisions, everything." My stomach turned. "Even if it's not true?" "Yes," he said. "It's not about what's true. It's about what they can prove. And if she's been collecting little examples to show you're confused or forgetful." I didn't need him to finish. I could see the picture she was trying to paint. A fragile, fading mother in need of rescue. Over the next week, the tension built like a storm. Emily's visits became more targeted. She'd bring forms for me to sign, just to make things easier. And each time, I refused, watching her smile grow tighter. Then came the Sunday lunch. My sister Claire stopped by, and I noticed something off immediately. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Halfway through the meal, Emily steered the conversation toward how hard it must be for me to keep up with everything alone. Claire nodded along, murmuring, "We just want what's best for you." That's when it hit me. Emily had been talking to other family members. She wasn't just building a case for court. She was recruiting witnesses. After they left, I sat in my chair by the window for a long time, staring at the oak tree. The branches swayed gently in the wind, like nothing in the world was wrong. But in my gut, I knew the storm was about to break. And when it did, I wouldn't just be fighting for my money. I'd be fighting for my freedom. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary, unremarkable day you'd never expect to remember for the rest of your life, until something happens to carve it into your memory like a scar. I'd just finished my morning coffee when I heard a knock on the door. Not the light, familiar knock of a neighbor or a friend, but a heavy, deliberate pounding. When I opened it, two men in dark suits stood there, one holding a thick envelope. "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" the taller one asked. "Yes," I said slowly, already feeling the air shift. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." My fingers trembled as I took it. The paper inside felt heavier than it should, as if it already carried the weight of what was about to happen. I didn't even have to read the first page to know. It was exactly what I feared. A petition for guardianship, filed by my own daughter, claiming I was mentally and physically incapable of managing my own affairs. I sank into my armchair, staring at the words. There were phrases like pattern of forgetfulness and financial mismanagement, listed dates where I had missed payments and confused conversations, all wrapped up in official legal language, and attached photocopies of my bills, notes about my supposed memory lapses, even statements from relatives. My sister's name jumped out at me. I felt my chest tighten. The betrayal was total. I called Peter immediately. He told me not to panic, but his voice was tense. "This is serious, Mary. You have 30 days to respond. If you do nothing, the court will assume the petition is valid." "I'm not incompetent," I snapped, the heat rising in my chest. "I know," he said, "but that's not enough. You have to prove it, and that means we need a plan, now." For the rest of the day, I felt like I was moving underwater. Every sound seemed muffled, every movement sluggish. I kept reading and rereading the papers, my mind snagging on the fact that my daughter had prepared this so thoroughly. Dates, witnesses, alleged evidence. She'd been working on this for months. The hardest part wasn't the legal threat, it was the personal one. How do you defend yourself in court against someone who knows your every flaw, every moment of weakness you've ever had? Someone you once trusted with your whole heart? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope lying in front of me like a viper coiled to strike. I kept hearing Emily's voice in my head, soft and patient. Just in case something happens. Now I understood. She wasn't talking about if something happened. She was making sure it would. The next morning, Peter connected me with a lawyer he trusted, Catherine Blake. She was sharp-eyed, direct, and wasted no time. "First thing," she said, "we need a medical evaluation. If a certified doctor declares you competent, that's strong evidence. Second, we need to gather financial records to show you've been in control. Third, we'll get affidavits from people who can vouch for your mental state. I nodded, but my stomach was in knots. The idea of having to prove my sanity to strangers was humiliating. And all the while, Emily was out there, probably thinking she'd already won. As Catherine laid out the timeline, hearings, depositions, filings, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't going to be over quickly. It wasn't just a legal battle. It was going to be a war. The first morning after meeting with Catherine, I woke up with a new, unfamiliar kind of determination. It wasn't anger, at least not the hot, reckless kind that makes you want to scream. It was cold, focused. If Emily wanted a fight, she was going to get one. I started with my records. Every bill I'd paid, every receipt I'd saved, every check I'd written over the last 2 years. I pulled them out, spread them across my dining room table, and began sorting them into neat stacks. I labeled envelopes in big, bold letters: utilities, mortgage, insurance, taxes. I knew Emily's game. She'd cherry-pick moments to make me look forgetful. An electric bill I paid 1 day late, a phone call where I momentarily blanked on a date, but I was going to show the full picture. Catherine had told me, "Mary, judges don't care about feelings, they care about facts. You have to drown out her narrative with hard evidence." So that's what I worked on. By the third day, my house looked like a crime scene investigation. Papers everywhere, sticky notes, highlighters. I even borrowed Peter's old filing cabinet just to keep things organized. But evidence wasn't enough. Catherine reminded me that this was as much about perception as proof. "You need people," she said. "Friends, neighbors, anyone who's seen you living independently. If the court sees you as socially active, engaged, and sharp, it undermines her claim." So I started making calls. Mrs. Green, my neighbor, who saw me tending the garden every morning. Linda from the community center, who I played cards with every Thursday night. Even the pharmacist at the local drugstore, who knew I never missed a prescription refill. Each one promised to give a statement. It gave me a small spark of hope, until I remembered there were people on Emily's side, too. The betrayal from my sister still stung. We'd been close growing up, but she'd always had a soft spot for Emily. I imagined Emily visiting her, tears in her eyes, spinning a story about how she was worried sick, about her poor, confused mother. That's when the paranoia began to creep in. Every time the phone rang, I wondered if it was another family member turning against me. Every knock at the door made me brace for more bad news. One afternoon, I was reviewing my insurance paperwork when I noticed a line item that didn't belong. An inquiry into my policy from a name I didn't recognize. I called the insurance company and my blood ran cold. Someone had requested a copy of my policy documents, and not just anyone, Emily's attorney. It hit me like a blow. She wasn't just trying to prove I was incompetent. She was already positioning herself to take control of my assets once she won. I called Catherine immediately. She was furious. "They're building a takeover plan. We'll file a motion to block any changes to your accounts until the hearing." It was a relief to hear she had a countermeasure, but the realization stayed with me. Emily was moving fast, and she wasn't afraid to cross lines I thought she'd never approach. That night, I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. How does a mother fight her own child, without losing what little of the relationship might be left? The answer I came to was as cold as the resolve in my chest. You fight like hell, and you deal with the grief later. The day the rest of the family found out was the day the ground under me really started to split. It began with a phone call from my nephew, Jacob. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Aunt Mary, I just wanted to check in. Emily came by yesterday and, well, she said some things about you." My stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" He hesitated before answering. "That you've been struggling, that you're forgetting to eat, leaving the stove on, misplacing important papers. She said she's just trying to protect you." I closed my eyes and gripped the phone tighter. The lies weren't just in a courtroom petition anymore. They were becoming the family narrative. A neat little story everyone could nod along to, because it sounded like love. By the end of that week, the damage was everywhere. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly sent me a long email about accepting help gracefully. My brother, who rarely called, left a voicemail saying, "Maybe this is for the best." For the best. As if having my freedom stripped away was some kind of gift. Catherine warned me this would happen. In cases like this, Mary, family often splits down the middle. Some people will believe her because it's easier than imagining she's lying. She was right. But knowing that didn't make the sting any less sharp. One Saturday, I decided to confront it head-on. I invited my sister Claire over for tea. No ambush, no shouting match. I wanted to look her in the eyes and hear, from her own mouth, why she was siding with my daughter. When she arrived, she avoided my gaze, fussing with her purse before sitting down. I poured her tea and asked plainly, "Why, Claire?" Her shoulders slumped. "Mary, I've seen you forget things. I've seen you get confused. Emily's just trying to help before something bad happens." I stared at her, my voice shaking. "Claire, do you honestly believe I'm incapable of living my own life? That I can't take care of myself?" She looked away. "I believe Emily loves you, and I believe she's scared." It was then I realized this wasn't just about greed. Emily was building a narrative so carefully that even intelligent, rational people could believe it. She was using my love for her as the perfect disguise for her betrayal. When Claire left, I felt hollow. Not angry this time, just diminished, like a piece of me had been chipped away. That night, I wrote a list, not of evidence, not of finances, just names. People who I knew, without a shadow of doubt, would still be in my corner when this was over. The list was shorter than I'd hoped, but at least it was real. The next week, Catherine scheduled a preliminary meeting with the judge. Emily would be there too. The thought of seeing her in a courtroom, speaking about me as if I were already gone, made my stomach turn. But there was something else beneath the dread, a cold, steady resolve. I might lose friends. I might lose family. But I wasn't going to lose me. If I'd been hoping that the preliminary hearing would clear the air, I was wrong. It only thickened the fog. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a mix that somehow made the air feel heavier. I sat at the long wooden table beside Catherine, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across from us, Emily sat with her attorney, a sleek, sharp-looking woman with a tight bun and a colder expression. Emily didn't look at me. Not once. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. He was a tall man with a stern face, the kind of presence that makes you sit up straighter without even thinking about it. The hearing began with Emily's lawyer outlining the petition. She spoke in calm, measured tones, painting a picture of a concerned daughter stepping in to protect her vulnerable mother. "She has exhibited a pattern of memory lapses," the lawyer said, her voice smooth as silk. "She has made several late payments, forgotten scheduled appointments, and has expressed confusion about her financial accounts. These are clear indicators of a decline in her ability to manage her own affairs." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Late payments? 2, over the course of 3 years, and both due to minor clerical errors that I corrected immediately. Appointments? 1 dentist visit I rescheduled because of a rainstorm. As for confusion over accounts, I'd asked a bank teller to clarify an interest rate change. That was it. But in the lawyer's mouth, these harmless, ordinary moments had become proof of incompetence. When it was Catherine's turn, she pushed back hard. "My client is fully capable of handling her own finances and personal matters. We have medical records, recent evaluations, and testimony from community members who interact with her daily. This petition is not about protection. It's about control." The judge listened without much reaction, jotting notes on a yellow pad. He asked a few questions about timelines, then scheduled a full hearing for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks. 6 weeks for Emily to keep gathering her so-called evidence. 6 weeks for me to live under the shadow of her accusation. After the hearing, I tried to approach Emily in the hallway. "Emily," I said quietly, "why are you doing this?" She finally looked at me then, but her expression was unreadable. "I'm doing what's best for you, Mom, even if you can't see it." Those words, they landed like a blade. Best for you. Spoken as if I were already gone, my voice and choices erased. That night, I pulled out the old photo albums. Pictures of Emily as a baby, her gap-toothed smile as a child, her proud high school graduation. I studied them, searching for some sign, some warning, that she would one day try to take my life out of my hands. But there was nothing, just memories, now tainted. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just defend myself reactively anymore. I needed to know why. Why she was doing this. Why now? And that meant digging into her life, the way she had been digging into mine. I had no idea what I was about to find. I started small. Nothing that could tip her off. A quiet conversation with Mrs. Green, my next-door neighbor, revealed more than I expected. Apparently, Emily had been stopping by when I wasn't home. She'd asked Mrs. Green if she'd noticed anything unusual about me lately, whether I seemed forgetful or a little confused. It wasn't just my neighbor. When I went to the pharmacy, the clerk, who'd always been warm to me, seemed awkward, almost guilty, before finally blurting out, "Emily asked about your prescriptions. She wanted to know if you'd been missing doses." The realization hit me hard. Emily wasn't just building a legal case. She was planting seeds in people's minds, so that by the time we got to court, the idea of me being incompetent wouldn't feel like a shock. It would feel familiar. Still, this didn't explain why. Emily had a good job. She wasn't desperate, so why would she go to such lengths? That's when I called Peter again. I told him what I'd learned, and he didn't waste time. "Mary, I'm going to do some digging. You need to be ready for the possibility that she's in trouble financially. And if that's the case, she might see your assets as her lifeline." I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me already suspected he was right. 2 days later, Peter called me back with a tone I'd never heard from him before. Tight. Urgent. "She's in debt, Mary. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans, and she's behind on her mortgage payments." I sat there in stunned silence. My daughter, the one who had always seemed so put together, was drowning. And instead of coming to me for help, she'd chosen to take it, all of it, by force. That knowledge lit a new kind of fire in me. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was up against someone who had every reason to push this as far as she could go. When the first official court date arrived, I walked into that room with my head high, even though my knees felt like they might give out. Catherine had warned me that the opposing side would try to rattle me, to make me seem confused or emotional. Sure enough, Emily's lawyer began by asking me to recount small details from recent weeks. What day I'd paid a certain bill, what I'd eaten for lunch on a specific date, whether I remembered the name of a teller at my bank. I answered each one calmly. Sometimes I smiled, sometimes I leaned forward, but I made sure my voice never wavered. I wanted the judge to see not just competence, but confidence. Then came the witnesses. One by one, Emily's allies took the stand. My sister, her voice trembling, said she'd noticed changes in me. A co-worker of Emily's claimed I'd once called her by the wrong name at a family barbecue 4 years ago. Even Mrs. Green, though reluctant, admitted that I sometimes seemed distracted. I could feel my defense cracking, not because they were right, but because their testimonies were believable. Ordinary moments twisted into a pattern I didn't recognize, but the court might. But just as the tension reached its peak, Catherine leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry, we're about to turn this around." And that's when she called our first witness. When Catherine called our first witness, I saw Emily's lawyer straighten in her seat, as if bracing for a blow. It was Dr. Harris, my primary physician for the past 8 years. He walked to the stand with his usual calm demeanor, nodding politely to the judge before taking the oath. Catherine wasted no time. "Dr. Harris, in your professional opinion, is my client, Mrs. Mary Thompson, mentally competent to manage her own affairs?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I've conducted regular checkups, including cognitive assessments, over the last several years. Mrs. Thompson's memory, reasoning, and decision-making abilities are all within normal range for her age. In fact, I'd say she's in better mental shape than many patients 10 years younger. Emily's lawyer objected, asking for specifics, but Dr. Harris remained steady. He explained the tests he'd performed, how I'd scored, and why he had no medical concerns whatsoever. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of relief. Then came the next witness, Linda from the community center. She described how I played cards every Thursday, organized book club discussions, and even taught a beginner's gardening class last summer. "If Mary's incompetent," she said firmly, "then I guess the rest of us are too." A few people chuckled quietly in the courtroom. Even the judge cracked the faintest smile. But Emily's side fought back. Her lawyer tried to poke holes in the testimony, bringing up little things, like the time I forgot to bring my reading glasses to book club, or how I'd once needed help setting up a Zoom call during the pandemic. It was exhausting, sitting there while every minor imperfection in my life was paraded around like damning evidence. By the end of the day, I felt stripped bare, as though the court wasn't just evaluating my competence, but my worth as a person. Still, Catherine leaned in as the judge adjourned and whispered, "We're making progress. Don't lose hope." But later that evening, as I sat alone at my kitchen table, the doubts crept in again. What if the judge believed Emily's version of me, the confused, forgetful woman who needed rescuing? What if the facts didn't matter as much as the story she'd spun so well? And then there was the other weight pressing on me, something I hadn't shared with Catherine yet. During the lunch recess that day, I'd stepped outside for air. As I turned the corner by the courthouse steps, I saw Emily talking to a man I didn't recognize. He was dressed in a sharp gray suit, but the way he leaned in close and slipped something into her hand made my stomach twist. When she saw me, she froze. Then, just as quickly, she slipped the item into her purse and walked away without a word. I didn't know what it was. A document? Cash? Something else? But I knew this. Whatever game Emily was playing, it went deeper than just this guardianship case, and if I didn't uncover it soon, the truth might stay buried forever. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's hand disappearing into her purse, the mysterious item hidden from view. I kept turning it over in my mind. Was it evidence? A bribe? A contract? Whatever it was, it had to matter. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to find out. I started by calling Peter. I told him about what I'd seen outside the courthouse. He didn't dismiss it as paranoia. Instead, his voice dropped to a serious tone. "Mary, if she's dealing with someone outside her legal team, it could mean trouble. For her. Or for you. I'll ask around." While Peter worked his contacts, I went through what I could control, preparing for the next hearing. Catherine had warned me that this round would be brutal. Emily's lawyer would be introducing new evidence, which, judging by the timing, made my stomach knot. 2 days later, Peter called back with news that chilled me to my core. "The man you saw? His name's Gerald Walters. He's a private investigator, one who's been hired in the past to dig up less than ethical information on people." I felt my throat go dry. "So she's digging for dirt on me?" "Maybe," Peter said. "Or maybe she's planting it." The thought made me nauseous. I'd been so focused on defending my life as it is, I hadn't considered she might try to create situations to make me look incompetent. The next court date confirmed my fears. Emily's lawyer presented a series of photographs, blurry, poorly lit shots of me standing in the supermarket, looking at my phone for an unusually long time, sitting in my driveway with the car running, pausing mid-step outside my mailbox. To the untrained eye, they looked like nothing. But the way her lawyer described them, evidence of disorientation and possible confusion in public, turned my everyday moments into sinister signs. Catherine tore into the photo's credibility, pointing out the lack of context and the obvious selective framing. But the seed had been planted. I could see it in the judge's furrowed brow. He was considering it. That night, Sitting in my living room, I thought about all the places I'd been, all the moments that could be twisted if someone wanted them to. How easy it was to make normal life look like decline when viewed through the wrong lens. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It can be the best weapon you have. If Emily thought I was too shaken to fight back, she was wrong. I decided then and there to stop playing defense entirely. I was going to get ahead of her. The next morning, I hired my own investigator, not to dig into Emily's personal life, though the temptation was strong, but to follow her case, to see who she met, where she went, and whether Gerald Walters kept showing up. Within a week, my investigator called me with something that changed the entire tone of the fight. It wasn't about me at all. It was about what she stood to gain if I lost. When my investigator, a wiry man named Collins with a voice like gravel, showed up at my door, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a manila envelope across my kitchen table. Inside were photographs, receipts, and, most damning of all, copies of emails. "Your daughter," Collins said, "is in negotiations to sell your house. She's already met with 2 real estate agents. The sale agreement she's been discussing lists her as the sole decision-maker, pending guardianship approval." My blood ran cold. I stared at the photos. Emily sitting across from a smiling realtor, a coffee cup between them, documents laid out on the table. "She's not just trying to control your finances," Collins continued. "She's lining up buyers for your property, and from what I can tell, she plans to move fast once the court hands her the keys." My house. The place where I'd raised her. The place where her father and I had built our life together. The walls that still carried the smell of Sunday roasts, the creak of the stairs he used to climb 2 at a time, and she was ready to sell it like it was nothing. That night, I met with Catherine and Peter. Catherine's face tightened as she flipped through the evidence. "This is motive," she said. "Clear, undeniable motive. She'll claim it's to cover expenses for your care, but with the debts she has..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We all knew. The next hearing was tense from the moment it began. Catherine called Collins to the stand. He testified about his surveillance, the meetings, the emails he'd verified. Emily's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed most of it in. When it was Emily's turn on the stand, Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. "Miss Thompson, are you currently in talks to sell your mother's house?" Emily's jaw tightened. "I've looked into options, yes, but only to ensure she's provided for if..." "Options that list you as the sole decision-maker, correct?" "That's a contingency plan." "Contingency plans that require your mother to be declared incompetent?" Silence. Catherine pressed harder. "And these meetings with real estate agents, were they before or after you filed this petition?" Emily shifted in her seat. "After." The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of the judge's pen. I watched my daughter sitting there, her face a careful mask, and I felt something strange. Not just anger, but grief. Grief for the little girl in the photos on my mantel, the one who used to climb into my lap and fall asleep against my shoulder. The judge called a brief recess. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the edge of the table, while Emily slipped out into the hallway. Through the glass, I saw her on her phone, her back rigid, pacing. Peter leaned toward me. "She's rattled. That's good. We keep the pressure on." But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a mother watching her child drown, except she was the one pulling me under to keep herself afloat. And I knew then, this fight wasn't going to end cleanly. The final hearing came faster than I expected, and yet it felt like I'd been living in this battle for years. By the time I walked back into that courtroom, I'd stopped expecting anyone to see me as just a mother. I was a litigant now, an opponent, and Emily was the same. The gallery was more crowded than before. Some faces I recognized, some I didn't. My sister Claire was there, sitting stiffly in the second row, her hands folded in her lap like she was bracing herself for impact. The judge began by summarizing the case. Emily's petition, my defense, the witnesses, the evidence. Then he invited final arguments. Emily's lawyer went first, leaning heavily on emotion. "This is not about greed," she said. her voice gentle but deliberate. "This is about a daughter who sees her mother struggling, who is stepping in before harm comes to her. It is about compassion, foresight, and responsibility." I could almost feel the words wrapping themselves in a cloak of virtue. But then I saw the judge glance at the stack of real estate documents Catherine had entered into evidence, and my heart steadied. When it was our turn, Catherine rose and walked slowly to the center of the room. "Your Honor, guardianship is not a precaution. It is the most extreme legal measure one can take against a competent adult. To strip someone of their autonomy, you must have overwhelming, indisputable evidence. What we have here is not evidence. It is a story carefully crafted to make my client seem incapable while ignoring the truth, that she is fully competent, and that her daughter stands to benefit financially if she wins." She laid out the chain of events, the debts, the secret meetings with realtors, the misleading testimonies. She held up my doctor's evaluation, the affidavits from neighbors, the bank statements showing every payment made on time. "Mrs. Thompson does not need rescuing," Catherine concluded. "She needs protecting, from the very person who should have been her protector." The room was silent when she sat down. The judge leaned forward, his elbows resting on the bench. "I've heard enough," he said. His voice was measured, but I could feel the weight of it. "Guardianship is not granted. Mrs. Thompson retains full control over her personal and financial affairs." It took a moment for the words to sink in. I'd won. Emily's face didn't change much, just a flicker, the faint tightening of her mouth. She didn't look at me as she gathered her things. She walked out without a word. The relief washed over me in waves, but it wasn't the kind of victory you celebrate. It was survival. After the courtroom emptied, Claire approached me. She didn't apologize. She just said softly, "I hope you know I thought I was doing the right thing." I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't know what the right words could possibly be. Peter offered to drive me home, but I declined. I wanted to walk, just for a little while, to remind myself that I still could, that every step was mine to take. And yet, even with the case behind me, I knew the damage between Emily and me wasn't something a legal ruling could fix. Some wounds don't heal in court. The first time I saw Emily after the hearing, it wasn't planned. I was at the farmer's market on a cool Saturday morning, sorting through a basket of peaches, when I looked up, and there she was, standing at the other end of the stall, a bouquet of sunflowers in her hand. For a long moment, neither of us moved. People brushed past us, laughter and bargaining filling the air, but it felt like we were the only two people in the space. Finally, she stepped closer. "Mom," she said, her voice careful, as if testing the ground before each word. I nodded. "Emily." There was so much I wanted to say, questions I'd been carrying like stones in my chest. Why? How could you? Did you ever think about what this would do to me? But I knew if I asked them now, in the middle of the market, the answers wouldn't be real. They'd be rehearsed, defensive. So instead, I gestured toward a bench by the fountain. "Let's sit." We sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the water filling the gap. She didn't look at me directly, just kept turning the bouquet in her hands. "I was scared," she said finally. I thought if I didn't take control, something bad would happen to you, and I'd be the one who failed you." I studied her face, searching for the truth. "And the house? The real estate meetings?" Her jaw tightened. "I was trying to get ahead of things. I thought if I could sell it, I could pay off." She stopped herself, biting the inside of her cheek. "Your debts," I finished for her. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. I felt something inside me shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a deep, aching sadness. Because now I understood. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. And somewhere along the way, she'd convinced herself that her betrayal was an act of love. "I can't go back to how things were," I said softly. "Not after this." Her eyes glistened. "I know." We sat there for a while longer, not speaking, until the sunflowers in her lap started to droop in the heat. When we stood, she hesitated, like she wanted to hug me, but wasn't sure if she had the right. I gave her a brief nod, and she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the oak tree outside my window. It was the same view I'd had before all this began, but it didn't feel the same. I didn't feel the same. I'd won my freedom, but I'd lost something else, something far harder to name, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever get it back. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to its outward routine. I still woke up early, brewed my coffee, and watched the sun climb through the branches of the oak tree. The bills were still paid on time, the garden still needed watering, and the Thursday card games at the community center still ran late enough to make me walk home under the streetlights. But underneath that surface normalcy, everything felt altered. Some friends still treated me the same as always, warm, casual, quick to ask about the weather or the latest book I was reading. Others, though, seemed tentative. Their conversations were polite but shallow, as if afraid to say the wrong thing, unsure whether to treat me like a capable woman or someone fragile. I hated it. The hardest part wasn't just the mistrust. It was the fact that Emily had left a stain that couldn't be washed out. Even though I'd won in court, her accusations lingered in the air, like the faint smell of smoke long after the fire's been put out. Catherine had advised me to consider a restraining order if Emily continued trying to interfere in my affairs. But Emily didn't come near me. She didn't call. She didn't write. And though part of me was relieved for the silence, another part found it unbearable. One afternoon, Peter stopped by with a fresh loaf of bread from the bakery. We sat on the porch, breaking pieces off and eating in the warm breeze. "You've been quiet," he said after a while. "I'm tired of talking about it," I admitted, "but I can't seem to think about anything else." Peter nodded. "It's going to take time. You went to war in a courtroom. That doesn't just fade." He was right. Winning the case had saved my independence, but it hadn't erased the fracture in my life. I had to rebuild, not just my reputation, but my sense of trust. So, I started small. I rejoined the community center's volunteer program, helping with the after-school reading group. I signed up for a gardening workshop at the library. I even took an online class in digital photography. Every step felt like reclaiming a little piece of my life from the shadow Emily had cast. Still, every so often, I'd see her face in my mind, calm in the courtroom, lips pressed together as if she believed every word she'd spoken about me, and I'd wonder if she truly thought she'd been doing the right thing, or if that was just the story she told herself to sleep at night. As the months passed, I began to understand something. Moving forward didn't mean pretending it had never happened. It meant carrying it with me, learning to live alongside the scar. And while the pain was still there, the fear was gone. She had tried to take my freedom, and I was still here. The first cool breeze of autumn swept through my kitchen as I stood by the open window, watching the oak tree shed its first few leaves. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you breathe deeper, as if you could pull clarity straight into your lungs. It had been months since the final hearing. My days were calmer now, slower in a way that allowed me to notice the little things again. The clink of my spoon in my teacup, the soft shuffle of mail slipping through the slot, the warmth of the afternoon sun settling over the garden. Life had steadied, but not in the same shape it once held. It was like a quilt I'd mended, functional, even beautiful in its way, but with visible seams that told a story. Sometimes in those quiet moments, I thought about Emily. Not the courtroom Emily with her tight-lipped answers and legal strategies, but the little girl who used to bring me wildflowers and leave crayon drawings on the fridge. I could still see her in flashes, her giggle when the dog chased her around the yard, her sleepy head resting on my shoulder during long car rides. Those memories weren't gone. They just felt distant. I didn't know if we'd ever be able to bridge the space between us. Trust, once broken, doesn't simply return because you want it to. It has to be rebuilt slowly, piece by piece, and even then, It might not look the same as before. But I also knew this. I couldn't spend the rest of my life staring backward. I'd fought for my autonomy, for my right to steer my own life, and I'd won. And in that victory, I'd learned that independence is not something to take for granted. It's something to guard fiercely, even from those you love most. As the leaves drifted down outside my window, I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to Emily, but to the version of myself who'd once believed betrayal could never come from within my own family. The kettle whistled softly in the background. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a promise. Then I sat down at my table, pen in hand, and began to make a list, not of what I'd lost, but of everything I still had. A home that was mine, friends who believed in me, the ability to choose my own path, and above all, the knowledge that no matter how dark the storm, I had the strength to stand in it. So I end my story here, with the hope that if anyone listening finds themselves in a similar fight, they'll remember this. Your voice matters, your life matters, and you are worth defending. Thank you for reading the whole story. Hope you will support my next products.